Imagine you would open an app and it would just stream you endless AI music that is so hyper tailored to you that no one else is going to want to listen to it. You're going to enjoy it so much, you're going to get addicted to it. This is basically going to be pornography, and it is like very antisocial. And I think this is like a local optimum that just totally misses the boat on music's potential. They get uninteresting for a broader audience. And I don't know exactly where the right optimum is here, but if you go all the way to the personalization direction, I think in general, that is very obviously sad for society and for music in general if people aren't sharing music. But also if you just like want to be like a little more like cold and calculating about it, I think the missed social aspects of music will actually make the music industry smaller.
Hey, Mikey, you don't know this, but my love language has always been communicating through song, even when it's not that appropriate to do so. Whenever my friends would make a video montage for another friend's birthday, I would always write a rap or I would sing something. And now Suno has just totally changed the game and improved my ability to share songs with all the people I love. So the product is one of my favorites. I'm really excited to talk about it. Thank you for coming on.
I'm really excited to be here. You're hearkening back to like your roots, like, 3,000 years ago. That's how people communicated, and somehow we lost it. So I love it.
So I just haven't evolved as much in the 3,000 years.
No, it's like old school. It's good. It's good.
Suno has grown tremendously, but before any of that, you were an early mover to music and expressive text. And maybe it was obvious to you that it would take off like this. Maybe it was less obvious to you how much it would take off. I'd actually just love to start a bit with why music. I know that you're a musician and you love music, but still you had so many options for the type of company that you could build with your background, PhD in physics, head of ML at Kensho. How did music become the thing?
Yeah, if I'm being honest, I don't think we knew it would work. And, when we started the company, we actually thought it would be much harder to make good generative audio than it was. You have to think back. This is 2022. And audio is fairly far behind text. You can think audio is like 2 years behind text. So this is really like 2020. And, this is like GPT-2 into GPT-3. And nobody really remembers GPT-2, but it can make text, but it's not amazing. And we thought it would be a lot harder. We thought we would need a lot more scale. And I think there was kind of this happy accident where it worked a little bit faster than expected. And, we got a few things right, and we got lucky on a few things, timing, how much open source software there was around text. And, I remember it very well. There were a lot of people that I really love and respect who said, you're audio experts, go start a speech company. Speech is huge, big market. Don't do a music company. It's a complicated business. And, but we were just like staying up late making music with these models that weren't meant to make music. And I remember at a certain point saying like to my co-founders, like, guys, we can't do this. Like, who are we kidding? Like, we can't be staying up late playing with the product in an abusive way. It's like we're doing things that the product isn't meant to do. Like, we have to go build the thing that like is consuming us. And so we did, and we said we're gonna build a music company and we're gonna see how it goes. And I think like I said, we got lucky that the timing was really good. And people seem to love it. I think in hindsight, maybe it's not so crazy that people love music. Music is really universal. It's part of every culture. It's part of every language. But certainly at the time, we didn't think so.
Yeah, I love that. And Martin told me that you are an extremely, extremely funky musician. I don't know exactly what that means, but it sounds like a big compliment from Martin.
Martin is a way better musician than I am. I do like funk, and so I end up accidentally playing a lot of funk. The revisionist history of the company is that at our last job, Martin and I used to have jam sessions in his basement to blow off steam after work. And we did. It's true. We did it all the time. It's not why we started the company, but, and I think it just goes to show how special music is, that it brings people together like that. It is an outlet. It is fun. I feel very fortunate to be in the position that I'm in now.
Yeah. While it may not be the origin of the company, it's the same pull that gets you to abuse your audio model and make it work a certain way. It's where you want to spend your free time. It's where you want to spend your extra time. And so why not make it the full-time endeavor? You mentioned that there was a lot of open source that you could leverage, and there was a lot of great progress with language models. So you're quite public about the fact that you guys use transformer-based architectures. Could you just share a little bit more about why you made that decision?
Maybe just to back up a little bit, right now there's basically two different techniques that people will use. There are transformers, which are primarily used in text. There are diffusion-based models, which are primarily used in images. Maybe it's not even worked out what the right way to do audio is, but there's a lot of good diffusion work in audio. And um, kind of at its core, transformers and autoregression in particular, this is just predicting the next little bit of the medium that you're doing. So in text, this might be predicting the next word. In audio, this might be predicting the next little slice of audio. And I think at the time, certainly our backgrounds were in text, and I think we understood it a lot. Um, but there's also something I think special about autoregression, and I think the theory on this isn't super well developed, and so I'm sure somebody in the future will figure out a more mathematical version of what I'm about to say. But there's something special about autoregression that it kind of figures it out um, bit by bit, kind of in chronological order, if you will, that tends to make for more interesting music. The rough cartoon would be that autoregression might make really interesting music that sounds like it was poorly recorded, and diffusion models might make beautiful sounding elevator music that is a little bit boring. And this is a cartoon; it's not entirely true, but I'm very glad, that we chose the route that we did, because actually music being interesting is really important. Music is a way to tell a story. You need to actually tell an interesting story, even if it's kind of a lossy mechanism, instead of kind of, let's say, painting a single picture that is like very hi-fi, but like less interesting.
That is helpful. And of course, there are things that are not unique to autoregressive models, but then there are things that will be unique to audio data specifically. So you have a bunch of learnings from the LM community. What's the biggest challenge in working specifically with audio data?
Yeah, I mean, I guess in some sense that's the advantage that we had is not only knowing how but also liking it. So one of the big problems is that it is big. It is unwieldy. It is extremely poorly organized. There's no like common crawl out there that is a good way to just, here's the starter data set and you can add on top of it, but it's a good way to get started. You can't search over it. You can't catalog it very well. So all of these things actually push people away from working with audio. There's a lot of schlep factor that you need to do. Um, and then I think that, by virtue of really loving audio and loving music, it was like a labor of love to figure out the right way to quote unquote tokenize audio. That was kind of the big thing that we had to figure out. There's all this amazing open source software out there on how to build transformer models, how to scale transformer models, how to train transformer models. The tokenization in text is just given to you approximately for free. And so we spent a lot of time really trying to understand what is the right way to tokenize audio that leads to good and interesting music.
I'm sure most of that you cannot share, but was there anything that was easier than you expected in training audio?
I can definitely share it at a high level. I think at its core, these things are just some sort. So the problem, to take a step back, is that audio is a continuous signal. It's not discrete like words are. And it is sampled very, very quickly, about 50,000 times per second. And so you need some tokenization scheme that is going to drastically reduce the space. It is going to go from sampled 50,000 times per second to maybe 50 times per second. And it is going to go from a really big continuous signal to a much smaller discrete signal. And at its core, there are various schemes that you can employ, but they are all just autoencoders of some kind. The audio word for this is a codec. You may be familiar with an MP3, where you have this really big audio file, you compress it down with MP3, you can decode it, and it still kind of sounds natural. Like, these are not new technologies per se, or they're not new concepts of learning to compress audio down to a smaller representation. You just need to spend a lot of time on the details to actually get it to work with your transformer architecture. And to go back to your first question, yeah, I think the timing was really good, that there had just started to be open source projects out there that actually let you train transformer models like pretty easily. A big thing for me, a big like influence for me is first MinGPT and then NanoGPT from Andrej Karpathy. And I think this is an amazing piece of software, because it just shows you it's actually quite simple. to train these things. It's actually not a lot of code. He even brews the transformer from scratch there. And you don't have to be afraid of these things. You just go and you do it. And as we evolved, so did the open source toolchain. And so there wasn't that much that we had to learn to do from scratch.
I think part of when we talk about LLMs and we talk about the text world, part of the name of the game, you may not need a lot of data in some domains, but in the LLMs that we use today with OpenAI, scale has been the name of the game. I'd love to hear whatever you can share on data curation. The tokenization is very helpful to think about, but what is the actual data that you are playing with the representation of?
Yeah, there's a lot of audio and music out there on the internet. The kind of the secret sauce is, scale is actually somewhat less important. The secret sauce here is really understanding your data, because you need a lot of metadata um, on the music that you have. You need a lot of descriptions. You need to know a lot of different types of things. But for example, you might want to know the genre, you might want to know the lyrics, but you might want to know the timestamps, other things in the audio, maybe a guitar solo or a beat drop or something like that. Obviously, there's kind of basic metadata like the bit depth of the file, the sampling rate of the file, stuff like this. So unlike text, there's just like way more metadata that you actually need to know about when you train these things in order to make it work. And fortunately or unfortunately, there's a lot of schlep factor in actually kind of learning to do that at scale.
I would assume it's some combination of labeling metadata internally and maybe some externally.
That's right. And inferring things and understanding where it's coming from. It's too much data to look at manually and really understand. So there's always heuristics that you're gonna have to use. We're pretty early here. I think like there's still a tremendous room. There's tremendous room for improvement in how we do this and the types of descriptions we have about music. The thing that's really interesting about music is different people will describe the same piece of music so differently. You might describe genres, you might describe instruments, you might describe vibes, and so
I may hate a song that you love. That's fine.
exactly. And so I think we will not solve this problem completely for a long time, and that's a good thing.
Okay, I do want to ask about that, about the different tastes and how you think about it, but maybe even just to pin that question home on the data curation, even upstream of the metadata that you need to understand music, I would imagine that there's a generalizability in different types of music that you have access to in your data sets. There may be audio files that are unrelated to music. And so just how do you think about creating the right data set for data curation?
Yeah, one thing that is maybe similar to the text world is like you need quality and you need quantity, and they don't necessarily need to come from the same place. But one thing that we're pretty we feel pretty strongly about is we don't really pass judgment on music. Like a file could be corrupt, a file may have low bit depth, may have the wrong sampling rate, but we're not really going to pass judgment about music, and so we're not going to sort of impart into these models my tastes or your tastes, for example, and that we're going to try to teach these models like this is music, this is everything that is out there. And then the flip side is we kind of transfer the burden onto the inference side of things, where it's like, I now need to have the model learn to understand what you bar want to hear, and not what kind of some generic semblance of what a human might want to hear. And that's a tricky problem. The one place where that does break is, we have a large and engaged user base, and we can certainly infer things from usage from the platform on what music is good and what music is not good. And this is an immense lever for us to improve our models. So just to be concrete about it, if you've used a product, you've noticed you click create and you actually get 2 songs back. It's partially because we're generous, but it's an immense lever.
Thank you for the generosity.
That's right. It's a lever where we can understand if one of those songs somehow we find out from your behaviors was good and the other one was bad. We now have kind of an incredible data collection mechanism for figuring out, here are 2 songs that our models think are kind of equally probable or equally good, and here is a human saying, no, A was good or no, B was good. And this is a way to steer models toward human preferences.
I love that. I used to be a data scientist before. So stories like that make my heart sing, and understanding what you're using in the product to actually take the user feedback, incorporate it back into understanding what works well in the model. Maybe before release, like let's say you're releasing a V4, which you recently launched a V4, and it has better audio and sharper lyrics and more dynamic song structure. You get a lot from putting it out in beta and seeing how are users actually interfacing it, what is hitting, what is not. But before you actually do a launch like that, what tactically are you doing to evaluate and make those claims in the model internally?
Yeah, I think for V4, happily, it kind of got better on every axis. It got the lyrics got better, the song structure got better, the audio quality got better. And so, often in these situations, you may be faced with a trade-off of like, here's a new model, and I think the song structure is better, but I think that the audio quality stayed the same, and then perceptually it's worse when you compare it to the song structure. So I think for V4 we got lucky, but tactically, or we worked hard until it got to the point where all three were better. Tactically, there's a lot of different things we can do. We can always run A/B tests on models. We can take 1% of our traffic and direct it to V4, and we can actually see how much more people engage with the songs and like the songs. And this is kind of a quantitative way to say model A is better than model B. The other thing though that's really important here is that music is different from text. It is subjective, and that makes evaluating these things really hard. And there's some positives and there's some negatives about that. One of the positives is we're not actually just chasing benchmarks. We're not trying to scale our model. They don't exist. We're not trying to scale our model to get a better SAT score or something like that. And judgment turns out to be really important in a lot of these things. And I think that always there's, when you're building products, there's always going to be judgment that you need to bring to bear. If we waited until things, every single time, if you waited longer to make things better and better, there are probably diminishing returns. And it takes judgment to figure out where is that sweet spot that you're ready to launch this thing. I think that candidly, we actually try to work with people who we think have excellent musical judgment.
How do you screen for that? Is it like, hey, you just passed 8 technical interviews, now let's see you on an instrument?
Not exactly. Although a lot of people end up, a lot of people are excellent musicians. Not just Martin. I am in fact one of the worst.
Yeah, I know. Rebecca is an excellent
Rebecca's
musician.
excellent, right? I'm in our studio. We use this studio some for work, but it is actually mostly for fun. For the people who are here, I think you can always get at these things. You talk to people about music. You listen to music together. It's a little bit vibey, but it's exactly that turns out to be important because you end up with a group of people who like truly deeply enjoy listening to and critiquing and talking about the fruits of their labor, meaning the music that we are making. And so it is not like, maybe you remember as a data scientist, it can be very laborious to like look at your data and look at your results, but that that's actually super, super important and super, super high leverage. And here it is not laborious because everyone actually loves music and loves listening to music and loves trying to describe the music and loves trying to critique what went well and what didn't go well.
Yeah, I love that. And I think with data science brain, my mind also just goes to the long tail and scale. Like maybe you got so much better at making my Hebrew pop, Mizrahi pop music that I like, but you became horrible at country, just using a cartoon as well.
Incidentally, by the way, the first drop of V4, it has since been fixed. We kind of screwed up Hebrew a little bit.
Oh, you screwed up Hebrew?
A little bit.
Next time I'll alpha test.
You didn't notice because we fixed it pretty quickly, but
okay.
Like for the first week or so, it was a little bit broken.
I love it. But yeah, there's just such a long tail and obscure music versus maybe there's a set that folks are more likely to prompt. And so you see that traffic go up and to the right, but you're, neglecting some other region. I'm not saying I'm saying this could hypothetically happen. So it becomes even more important. What are the investments that you have to make? You said, luck plus working hard and getting all of these things better, the audio, the lyrics, the dynamic song structure. What needs to happen between V3 and V4 to make it better?
I can say between V3 and V4, and then, I'm glad you didn't ask for V4 to V5 because actually what you have to do is you actually have to understand where this thing falls short before you actually figure out how to improve it.
Well, I was maybe going to ask V4 to V5, so I'm glad you stopped me in my tracks.
I can speculate, right? But it takes time and usage and a community of engaged users to actually figure out where it needs to get better. I think on the audio quality, it is a better way to represent audio for the model that leads to better audio quality. Um, on the song structure, it is a variety of more efficient training techniques to get a better model, more descriptive data, um, more interesting post training techniques, and then on the lyrics, honestly, on the lyrics, I think this is going to be a huge area of improvement for us in the future. It is so important to music, and I actually appreciate this more and more as time goes on, how important lyrics are to music. I think it's really funny that starting a music company, I have a new appreciation for English, but I think there was just a lot of low hanging fruit that we picked, and we will continue to pick. I think that's still a place where there's just very obvious gains to be made.
What about on the non-model side? So, some of the release with V4 doesn't just look like, great, you have better audio and sharper lyrics, but it's you can make designs to complement your music vibe. And there's all these prompt guides. And so I'm curious kind of what you've learned from your users that they want more of on the product side and what you've done there as well, outside of the model.
Yeah, I think, I'll preface that by saying, like, I think increasingly that is where all of the progress has to happen. And there's an interesting cultural shift that you have to make, that at the beginning, when you start, the only thing you have is your model, and your whole product is like whatever your model happens to be able to do. And then, eventually you have to get to a point where actually the opposite happens. It's like you have an idea for an experience that will delight a user, and you have to figure out how to pull that out of your model. And that's like backward from how it starts originally. And it is an important cultural shift, I think, if you actually want to make products that people use. I think that, going forward, there's just, obviously there are plenty of rough edges in the product that will get smoothed out. But I think about this just as like, what are the extremely delightful musical experiences that we can deliver to people that they have never had access to? And I think you will see an increasing number of them be, I will use a somewhat provocative term, be multiplayer. I think in some sense, music is a game. It is interactive. It is engaging. It is fun by yourself, but it's more fun with your friends. And I think that right now, it is really not a multiplayer game, what we have built. And I think that the most fun experiences that you will see come out, let's say in the next year, will involve 2 or more people. And I personally find those to be the most addicting.
If you could wave a magic wand that, the wand also includes some infinite compute and resources and time, what would the multiplayer experience look like?
I can say a few. I don't know if I have one. I think that all multiplayer create things should feel like a jam session. And now, technologically speaking, anything synchronous is actually really hard. Because these things aren't really, like our ears are very sensitive, and it's hard to really do things in real time. But anything where you and I could basically be effectively playing instruments together, playing music together, but it's actually all Suno, and we are listening to one another and musically responding to one another. I think the asynchronous version is one where I can have some kind of musical idea or make a song, and I can give it to you, and you can riff on it. And maybe that looks like covering the song, remixing the song, sampling from the song, otherwise changing the song somehow, and then passing it back to me, because this is actually how music is meant to be a conversation.
It's kind of like the versioning of music, but
Exactly.
you get to collaborate on it together. The Google Doc of creating a song or creating maybe something bigger than a song too.
That's exactly right. And and then I think the other thing that's really important there is just a richer set of inputs. I can tell you that also some of the best Suno music that gets made and the most fun we'll have is like, I'm in our studio. We will sometimes like analog record a few bars. There's a piano over there. There's lots of instruments here, and then we will upload it into Suno and kind of extend it. And I think incorporating more from people's daily lives is an incredible source of inspiration. I don't know if you're familiar with Charlie Puth, who and he is incredibly talented, and he makes music from the sounds that he collects from his everyday, and that is amazing. But somehow one should not need perfect pitch in order to find inspiration from sounds from your everyday and make music about it. Like, I can do that too. I don't have perfect pitch. And somebody who is a musical novice should be able to bang on a coffee cup and be like, that was really interesting. Let me see where I go from there. Let me pass that sound to you. Let you remix it somehow and pass it back to me. So I think I think we are so early in this journey, but I think it will just get deeper and deeper, more and more fun, better and better music will come out of it. And the thing that's really important to remember here is that we feel a connection to music both from the sounds, but also from the person behind the music. And when a piece of music comes from somebody you know, um, that personal connection is much, much deeper than when it comes from your favorite artist whom you've never met.
I love that. And, what I immediately think of is just that sounds can also capture moments in time. I don't know, like, yes, maybe I can make a sound right now that doesn't mean much, but I could also go to a wedding and there might be glasses that clink together and you can kind of capture that sound forever in a unique way. So I love that concept. I love that idea.
We call that soundtracking your life, basically. And I think this is basically the equivalent of a selfie in music.
Well, I'm curious about that, the equivalent of a selfie, because there's this multiplayer aspect of creating songs together, but there's also this everyone can be a creator aspect. Like, I can take a selfie. I don't need to be a serious photographer. I can post it on Instagram. So what is the difference between how a musician, an AI hobbyist, and casual users use Suno?
It's a great question. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to give you exact boundaries between all of those creators.
There may be overlap too.
Totally. The arc of technology in music has basically forever, like for the last 250 years, trended away from you need skills and means to make music, and increasingly toward you need taste. So, we say, like, increasingly your fingers are less important and your ears are more important. And, the last big wave was digital production. You used to need, before digital production, you used to need to go to, a very expensive recording studio with these giant consoles and analog record stuff. And it cost a lot of money. You needed a lot of means. You needed an advance from someone to do that. And then you get digital production, where now a 15-year-old sitting in their bedroom with a laptop can make hit songs. And the reason is that they have amazing ears, and they use their tastes and the new set of tools available to them to make beautiful music that everybody loves. And you fast forward, I think that this is just a continuation of that, perhaps an accelerating continuation. But now I'm able to describe music and get something out. And increasingly, I'm going to have to use my ears to figure out that was good, that was bad. This is how I tweak it. This is how I don't tweak it. This is how I riff on it, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think that that's actually really powerful for all of those groups. And I think the selfie is actually a really good analogy, because the fact that I carry my phone around in my pocket wherever I go, and I can take a picture, and I can take a picture of a beautiful sunset, over a bridge in Cambridge, Massachusetts, or I can grab a selfie with a friend when I bump into them and it's like kind of crooked and the lighting is terrible. And somehow both of these have a place in society. And actually that selfie, maybe it's really important because we send it to a mutual acquaintance of both of ours and it's a special moment. Or maybe that beautiful picture that I took of a sunset, I put on Instagram and it gets millions of views and I feel amazing and famous and like a tastemaker because I captured that moment. Neither one of those happens without the piece of technology that is the camera that I carry around with me all the time.
Yeah. So you're saying that regardless, people can use technology in different ways, but they maybe access the same UX and potentially some power features for the people who want to create the beautiful sunset equivalent in music.
I think the UX is also very similar to photography in the sense that, like, I can upload that picture to the internet as it is. I can also start to tweak it with more power tools if I'm really dead set on getting the details right. And I think music will be the same way, where, like, here's this musical idea and I'm going to put it out there and it's going to be a little rough around the edges, but it's going to capture something. Or I'm going to sit there for hours trying to perfect it until it is exactly as I want it to be.
I'm actually curious. I have no idea the answer to this, but you started on Discord, moved to web. Now you've shipped iOS and Android recently. Have you seen a difference in how folks interact? You mentioned rough around the edges, what they can do, the time investment they're putting across these different devices. And I recognize that it's early on mobile still.
It is early, but I'll give you a sense for where we're going. I think that Discord is very active, but the bot, you can't use the product on Discord anymore. I think that it would be a shame if our mobile app is just looks like a version of our web app that happens to be on your phone. And the reason is that your phone is an incredible piece of technology with access to a camera and a microphone and a touch screen and your photos and lots of other stuff. It is connected to all of the people that you know. And if we didn't somehow use that as a way to bring different creative experiences to people, then in some sense, this was like a bit of a shame. And so, maybe this starts with, and you can do this in the app, you can take a picture and you can turn that into a song. But I would hope that that evolves into maybe I can, drum on the phone to kind of get a vibe or a beat. Maybe I can even do the Apple bump thing where you bump two phones together and you and I can actually make music
Yeah,
together
that's how
in
we
real time,
collaborate.
right? Like, how cool would that be? So I think we are super early there, but I think you will see these platforms diverge.
I love that. How's your team structured right now? So who's thinking about these UX and these different interfaces? Is that something that all the product teams think about? What is going on behind the scenes at Suno?
I think everybody thinks about it. We have some incredibly talented product people on staff. You mentioned Martin, who is incredible. Jack Brody, who used to be the head of product at Snap, recently joined us and is amazing. He's incredible, and I feel very lucky that he works with us at Suno. I think that there's something really interesting. I'll tell you something bad about the company, which is that by virtue of everybody here like truly deeply loving music and the vast majority of people here being reasonable at an instrument or three, sometimes actually we don't have empathy for a user who is a relative musical novice. And this is actually a bit of a problem, right? Like empathy for your users is quite important. And so we end up spending a lot of time talking to users. A really early hire was a full-time UX UX designer who spends an inordinate amount of time interviewing users because if you're not careful, you will end up building the product. I think that assumes more musical sophistication than it should.
I love that because, we talked about how you kind of screen for that, right? You want to be able to scale taste. You have to do a lot of looking at the data, listening to music, being passionate about the product. And then the flip side of that is how do you, for someone who has never played music before, who's never had the experience of creating music, how do you make sure you're always empathizing with them and always understanding like how they would want to explore and how they would want to see the world?
I agree very strongly with that. I'll say I'm a steward of the company culture, and we are very choosy. And I think company culture, in my mind, is a lot about trade-offs, and it is indeed a trade-off that everybody here is a relative musical expert, and it's not without its downsides. But I think for us, it is very obviously the right trade-off.
Was this a difficult trade-off for you, or was it an obvious one?
I think it was like kind of obvious. It has some really interesting knock-on effects where everybody here also really enjoys hanging out with one another. The office environment is quite lively. I had to kick people out of this room to record the podcast. Now, I mean, and so it's one of those things where it's actually really hard to know. Maybe I'm doing some revisionist history here because you have founders of the company and all love music, and so in some sense that's obvious. And I don't know if it was this deliberate when we first started out, but right now it is very deliberate.
Given the musical inclination of a lot of folks at the company, you said that early on in the DNA, you had this audio model and you were hacking around it to make music. Have any users hacked the product in a way that was really not intuitive to you or that, surprised you and you think about the product differently now?
Oh, totally. This is maybe one of my favorites, which is we let you go back retroactively and edit lyrics. And so you wrote lyrics for a song, you made a song, and then we'll go back and let you retroactively edit the lyrics that are displayed on the song. And the reason is perhaps, for example, I'm writing a song about myself because I'm a narcissist. And the only way I can get it to actually say Mikey and not Mickey is to write MY-KEY, right? That turns out not to be the case, but imagine that is the case. That's the only way that I can get it to pronounce my name right. And then I want to go back and actually retroactively have it just say Mikey so that when somebody's reading it, seems like a very straightforward feature. And then it turns out what people will do is they will start to go back and they will edit their lyrics to basically publicize themselves. They'll write their life story in the lyrics. They'll tell you what was going on in their heads when they were writing the song. I think about this as like the plaque at the bottom of a picture in a museum where someone has told you like, this is the artist, this is what's going on in their life. This is what the picture is of. And I think this is an incredible hack of the product that like people are proud of what they do and they're trying to show you it. And I think it makes the songs far more impactful, far more moving. I'll give you an example here, which is adjacent to it. We had someone write us that I'll try to say the story quickly. He had taken some poetry that his grandfather had written and turned it into a song. His grandfather was in failing health, and he turned it into a song, and he plays it for his family, and they're all in tears. They all know the poetry, and it really hits home. And I think this is amazing. And I don't know what it would be like to go and listen to that song without knowing that first, but I promise you, knowing that first, it hits you so much harder. And music has context that is important to it. So, I thank our users for showing us the power of that.
Yeah, I love that. They want to put it in an archive and have you understand, like, this was the motivation, this is the inspiration, this is what's going on here. I'll ask you a broad question. It's helpful to hear how folks hack the product and also where you see the product is going. But I want to talk about just music in general in the future. I think the example that you gave is probably not a professional artist, but I know that you've done collaborations with Timbaland. What does the future of the music industry look like?
I will. I can only speculate here. I think that these tools are, our product is primarily geared toward everybody, not toward professionals. But our product is obviously useful to a wider range of skill sets, and I know a ton of professionals who use the product and love the product, even if they don't talk about it publicly. I think that. Let me say this. I think I have heard. To the extent that there's like the older existing music industry and the AI people trying to invade it, which I think is maybe a little bit reductive, but there's one thing that everybody agrees on. You'll hear everybody say, AI is coming. It's inevitable. We know it's coming. I try to program that out of people's heads here because it's a little bit nihilistic and it's a little like you can just sit back and the future's going to happen. And I think that AI will be really impactful for the music industry, but in itself is a technology. And there are good versions of the future of music and AI, and there are bad versions of the future of music and AI. And if we don't build the good future of music, then someone else is going to build the bad future of music. As an example, I don't want somebody to build a product where you can just make endless songs that sound like your favorite artist without their permission. I think that would be actually very bad for music. So the future of music that I would like to build is one that has far more people participating in it, far more people creating, far more people sharing music, much more active and engaged consumption experiences, not this like put it on in the background while I code, which is fine, but like there is more to music than that. I think a lot more people will be able to make their livelihoods with music than they do now. I think there will be a much broader and much more accessible set of tools for making music. Importantly, I think that the future of music probably will evolve faster than it does now. I think this is maybe a little optimistic, but right now, music only really evolves sonically. Song structure doesn't really change a lot. Melodies and harmonies are somewhat static. And then sonically, music has gotten really, really interesting. And I think that and hope that music will start to evolve, will continue to evolve sonically, but will start to evolve again in these other ways. Like, why hasn't there been a 7.5-minute hit song, in the last decade? I'm making that up, but that's probably approximately true.
Yeah, well, all our attention spans are, it's like the minute clip of the song that then becomes the viral thing.
Okay, but I would answer that if we're going to clip music because our attention span is so short, a minute clip of a 3.5-minute song is a very different experience from a 1-minute song. Why isn't somebody making a 1-minute song? This is a new art form.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of interesting things here, including just the discovery of music itself, too. Like a lot of people discover music via TikTok now, which was, well, we'll see, which was not the case.
So anyway, I think if we are able to do that, one thing that I point out to people is that the music economy should be much bigger than it is right now. And I think ultimately that will be the litmus test for whether this has been an impactful change or not.
What do you hear from the artists themselves and music labels? Like, what do they want? And I know you cannot speak for an entire class of music labels or an entire class of artists, but what are the range of responses that you hear to AI is coming, which I know you don't think is inevitable.
Yeah, I'll say probably the slice of executives and artists and producers and creatives that I talk to is probably biased more pro AI, or certainly at least open-minded toward it, despite I will also never turn down a conversation with somebody who disagrees with me on this, and I actually actively try to talk to people who disagree with me on this. I think um I think that people want to make sure that there is not a bad version of the future of AI in music. So maybe one of the ones is what I said, where there's just endless impersonation.
Problem in audio too, right? Not just music. Just no one wants to be singing things, being made money off of, spamming people when they're not in control of it. And that's an extremely reasonable thing to want.
100%. You should, it is in some sense an extension of your right to privacy. I think that you should not be able to, somebody should not be able to rip you off and make money off of it without your consent. So I think name, image, likeness is really important. I think that there are other mildly dystopian futures of AI in music, where imagine you would open an app and it would just stream you endless AI music that is so hyper tailored to you that no one else is going to want to listen to it. You're going to enjoy it so much, you're going to get addicted to it. This is basically going to be pornography, and it is very antisocial. And I think this is a local optimum that just totally misses the boat on music's potential and is just a little societally sad.
That's kind of interesting, because I see the antisocial view that you said, that's okay, you get this infinite music that just is perfect for you. But I also see a positive there in personalization. Right now I'm prompting music that I want. Is there a way for a model to inherently understand my preferences? And the same way that I get a playlist recommendation, I can get music recommendations. I'll say I don't see that as an all bad thing. So maybe walk me through it.
It's not an all bad thing. But I think there is an inherent trade-off between personalization and isolation, let's say, where if things get too hyper personalized, they get uninteresting for a broader audience. And I don't know exactly where the right optimum is here, but if you go all the way to the personalization direction, I think in general that is very obviously sad for society and for music in general if people aren't sharing music. But also if you just want to be a little more cold and calculating about it, I think that the missed social aspects of music will actually make the music industry smaller. So I think here there are no difficult trade-offs to make. My hunch is that the optimum, both in the size of the music industry, is also some sort of optimum in how happy music makes people, how much music gets shared, how much music is kind of valued as an art form, etc.
This is a little bit speculation on the size of the pie and the different levers that could control the pie of the music industry. Do you have any thoughts on how the business model evolves? You have AI music, you have more content out there. We'll see in 5 years, but you have artists with different appetites towards leaning into versus leaning away from AI.
I have a lot. I think that fortunately or unfortunately, even without AI, the streaming model is getting increasingly difficult. There is just a tremendous amount of content out there. Spotify is not out of music by any means. Spotify has a lot of content. And what that means is that artists and creators are competing for an increasingly limited share of the pie, basically. And there are increasingly cleverer and cleverer schemes for people to figure out how to divvy up the pie in interesting ways. And honestly, to the detriment of trying to figure out how to grow the pie. The really big parts of music are the really engaging parts, the live music, interaction with fans. And I think that when I think about what AI can do, it is bringing creation to a lot more people. That is actually a fun and engaging experience, and it is really important that people actually enjoy creating music. I think about if you read the earnings calls from the major rights holders, there's a lot of talk of super fans. This is the next wave of monetization is going to come from increased interactions between fans and their favorite artists. And when I think about it, I think the ultimate form of super fandom is probably something like making music with your favorite artist. It's not like an AMA with someone you think is your favorite artist, but is probably somebody on their social media team or something like that. And so we ran a contest recently with Timbaland where his fans could remix his music on Suno, and almost 100,000 people participated in that. And to me, this is like, as a fan, like the highest form of interaction with the artist. I get to feel like a part of the creation process with my favorite artist. That's amazing. For the artist, it's an increasing level of fan engagement that they've never had before, right?
And a completely new way to engage with fans too, that's more intimate.
Exactly. And so, the way I think about it is like, let's get that right. Let's figure out the levers that we're going to use to grow the pie, the new experiences that were never possible before, and probably the business model on those becomes somewhat obvious. But I think if we obsess about the business model before we get those right, we're probably shortchanging ourselves.
Yeah, that's interesting because I think that right now a lot of people might look and say, okay, inference costs money. What is the right pricing model to make, to run out of credits on Suno? And so it sounds like right now where your head's at, of course, you have a pricing model there.
We've never changed it. We've never changed our pricing.
Yeah, there's kind of this broader view of a lot of artists make money in other avenues, including their live experiences, their concerts. What are kind of these big new experiences that you can have with AI, with existing artists, or maybe not, where you can grow the pie even more?
That's exactly right. Another huge thing is merch. Right now artists make a lot of money from merch. I'm going to wear the t-shirt of my favorite artist, or I'm going to have a CD. How cool would it be if merch were somehow like, I have a personalized song by that artist or a song that we made together somehow? Like, I think that the sky is the limit here.
100%. It's a good note to almost end on. Mikey, I'm sad to reach the end of our time. I have so much. It's so interesting and so many more questions to ask you. But I'll end with, how have you personally changed as a person and a leader since starting Suno? It's been such an adventure. So I want to hear about Mikey.
It certainly has been an adventure. That's a tough self-referential question. I think I have such a fun job, and I feel really fortunate to have such a job. One thing I mentioned before is I have a new appreciation for lyrics. That lyrics really make the music in ways that I really didn't appreciate before, which is kind of interesting because it's like not really where we spent the bulk of our time. I don't know. I don't think I'm a particularly effective leader. So maybe you want to ask somebody else, like
That's
the
not what
lessons
I've
learned.
heard. So you're being humble. But on the lyrics front, what has stood out to you, or how have you changed the most in how you think about and appreciate lyrics?
I think that I probably realized the extent. I used to know the extent to which bad lyrics would really mess up a song, and if you do that in Suno, you'll see it's just terrible, and you only need one bad line to kind of ruin the experience. But like amazing lyrics. I just have new appreciation for it. I'll tell you something personal. I'm not the best reader. I was never great at like English. English is my first language, but I was never great at English, and so like I think I have always kind of shied away from these types of things. Like I don't appreciate poetry, or I didn't appreciate poetry. And so this has just been an opportunity for me to actually start to go deep on the part of music that was kind of like undervalued in my brain. And so I think it has given me incredibly new appreciation for songwriting and lyrics in particular.
I love it. Thank you, Mikey, so much.
So great to be here. Thanks for having me.